Right, so this is the final session on serving. We have been speaking about what it means, it's the final session on discipleship. We have been talking about what it means to be a disciple. We have touched on being a disciple, being a friend of Jesus. We've touched on communion as a part of discipleship. We've spoken about being yoked and walking yoked to Jesus and how to make disciples. That's been here on the Sundays and also on the Wednesday Bible studies. And then 2 weeks ago, Bill gave us what I thought was an amazing word on how to worship as a part of being a disciple of Jesus. And I hope after that you understood why we worship, why we take this 20 minutes right at the beginning of the service to worship God, which is not just singing to God. If you listen to Bill, you understood that this act of worship takes us before the presence of God, and it places our spirit over and above the problems and the situations that are in our life that crowd us and that hinder our communication with God. And also by placing ourselves before God, we transform ourselves. And worship also helps us to engage in a spiritual battle. So after all, worship is key to reveal God's power in our lives. And Bill encouraged us to worship actively, to be active worshippers, and to worship on purpose, not out of preference. So maybe you came here to TFC this morning and you found that the musical choice was not of your liking. And maybe you found that our musical ability was not that wonderful. And maybe you heard each and every single mistake that we made while playing. Well, that is your preference. But hopefully, as you started to sing, you began a conversation with God. And you started, that was funny because, never mind, You started a conversation with God, and you started meaning each and every single one of the words that you were singing to Him. And then you started focusing on what a wonderful God you serve. And you started forgetting all about the badly played guitar on the background. And that is worshiping out of purpose. Now, one thing that I've said before, but maybe you haven't heard me say, is that the word worship means to bow down and bend over. It's a symbol of homage. There's many people in the Bible that actually drop to their knees and bring their forehead to the ground in the presence of someone that is of higher status than them. That is to worship. But also worship means to serve or to be of service. When Moses asked Pharaoh to let the people go to the desert to worship God, he can also be translated to let the people go to offer sacrifices or to hold a festival to the Lord. So Moses is talking about service. Let the people go to the desert to serve the Lord. So if you are a disciple, you worship God, you will sing your praises to Him. You sing songs of thanksgiving, you sing your psalms of proclamation, and you serve God. Now, for the past month, we have been talking about discipleship, about being disciples, and if you are a disciple, it means you serve. So I think let's start at the very beginning. Who do you serve? And I say in general, that's a question you can only answer yourself. But I'll say in general, as a guideline, you serve who or what you follow. So ask yourself who you're following, and that will give you the answer as to who are you serving. And once you have got the answer, you will know where to go and which example you are following. I can answer though for Tenerife Family Church. We follow Jesus, and Jesus is our master, He's our teacher, and He is the example that we want to conform ourselves to. It may sound very Sunday schoolish, and if it is, I'm sorry, but we want to be like Jesus. And so now the next thing that we need to establish, since we are disciples of Jesus, we want to follow His example. Did Jesus serve? That will be, for me, the next logical question. Philippians 2, 6-8 says, though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal death on the cross. That is Jesus. That's the servant king that we sang just now. The Son, God the Son, taking human form to become God's solution for mankind's mess. So as far as serving goes, yes, Jesus is definitely our role model. Now the next question, Jesus served who? Who did Jesus serve? So if you look into the scriptures, I'm not going to go into everything, but I'll just summarize. He serves God the Father, first and foremost, when he became obedient unto death. The gospel gives us accounts of what he prayed and how he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. And then he says, if possible, may this cup be taken from me, but not as I will, but your will. And then a bit later in the Gospel of John, chapter 17, he says, I have brought you glory by finishing the work you have given me to do. Jesus serves God the Father. The next thing Jesus does is he serves his disciples. He serves his immediate circle. He spends 3 years with them, walking up and down with them, teaching them, opening up to them the things of heaven and building up their faith. And also he shows them how to serve practically by example. And I think we can all think of, it's John 13, where Jesus washes the disciples' feet, right? He's showing them practically how to be a servant. But I don't want to dwell in this because Jesus didn't just stay there serving God the Father and his immediate circle. Jesus also served all of Israel, the entire nation of Israel. He spends all those years of public ministry traveling up and down the country, teaching the people, spends hours preaching to them, thinking of parables to simplify heaven so they could have a grasp of it. And he performs miracles to healings, delivering of the possessed. He feeds the multitudes. But he doesn't stay there. He doesn't just serve God the Father, his friends, and the people of Israel. But you see that Jesus, he continues, he expands the circle of service, and he serves even the Gentiles, those who were not of true-blooded Israelite background. He serves the Gentiles. We see him going to Tyre and Sidon. I think it's the Gospel of Mark. I think it's 7, that he actually delivers a demon-possessed little girl. You remember the Gentile woman that is persistent and heal my daughter, heal my daughter. Even the gods have the scraps from the master's table. That one, he delivers the demon that was possessing her daughter. And we see him by the well in Samaria. He teaches the Samaritan woman, and then he stays on and he teaches everyone in that village. So Jesus serves God, serves his friends, serves Israel, and serves the Gentiles. Jesus served God and served his neighbor, right? He's the prime example of love God, love people. He served everyone, the entirety of mankind, even those who despised him, even those who betrayed him. Mark 10:45 says, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give life as a ransom for many. And that is the example that we follow. And our paraphrase, love God, love people. Right. So now we know who we need to be serving. Now we need to understand how did Jesus serve. The first scripture that I read, Philippians 2, says that Jesus took the humble position of a slave. Now, up to here, everything was fine, but now I'm starting to not like where this is going, because I don't want to be a slave. Being a slave is not nice. Slaves were worked to the bone. Slaves carried out all sorts of awful duties that nobody else wanted to take care of, and they were oppressed, and they were treated horribly, right? So I don't know about you, but I don't fancy being a slave. But, as we said in the beginning, and Bill reminded us, we worship out of purpose, not out of preference, even when it sucks. So, Let's talk about slaves. Paul gives us some guidelines in some of his letters in how the different members of a Christian household should interact with one another. And he covers the point of servants and how servants ought to serve, basically, how slaves ought to serve. It's in Colossians 3 and Ephesians 6. Both texts are practically verbatim copies, one of the other. So I'm just going to read Colossians 3:22. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eyes is on you to carry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whenever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ that you are serving. Let's just leave it there. So the things that stand out to me out of this verse and how slaves are commanded or are taught to serve. First thing that came out to me, obey in everything. Serve readily. Serve now. Don't procrastinate. Don't wait, or don't wait until there is somebody around to see you doing the service. Just serve. Do you remember the parable of the wise and the foolish servant? I think it's Matthew 25. The master returns and he finds one of the servants actively serving. And the master returns when the servant doesn't expect, and he finds his other servant procrastinating, indulging, not doing what he was supposed to be doing, wasting time. Read the parable to the end, and I hope that encourages you not to procrastinate and not to waste time. The next thing, work with all your heart, Paul writes. So when you serve, give it your all. Just give it your all. You've got talents, you've got gifts, just use them. They're not going to run out by using them, you know. On the contrary, you may find that by using your talents increase. They sharpen, and you may even receive a few extra ones. There's another parable about servants and a master that goes away, and he gives talents to his servants. Some of the servants use their talents, another servant does not use the talents. The ones that use their talents, they double the amount of talents that they had to begin with. And the master rewards them both in exactly the same manner. It doesn't matter that one had 10 and the other had 6 to end with. They both receive the exact same reward. Now, the servant who did nothing with his talent and hid it in the ground, again, it didn't go so well for him. So I hope you're encouraged to put your talents to serve. You use them, and you use them to the best of your ability. You give it your best drive, and you don't serve half-hearted, because Jesus didn't half-serve you. He didn't just go and said, well, you know, the crown of thorns and the lashings, that was just enough. I'm going to skip on the cross altogether because that's going to kill me, right? You know, you're safe enough now. No, he did it with excellence. He paid the price in full. So likewise, his disciples are called to serve with excellence. And that's one thing that really struck me when the Mercy Ship guys were here. When they spoke about their ministry, they serve all of their patients with excellence. They provide them with the best medical care they can. They're able to provide for them, regardless of who they are, regardless of where they come from, regardless of what they have. Make excellence your working ethic, because in doing so, you will never give a poor testimony to the Lord, ever. Now, the other thing that struck me out of Paul's words, it is the Lord Christ you are serving. We are called to serve the community as if we were serving Jesus himself. Now, I'm sure if Jesus walks through the door and tells you, I'm really thirsty, you will happily oblige. If there's no water here, you will run, even if necessary, to the supermarket that's now the new one at the far end of the road. You will run there, even if it's hot outside, just to get him some water. But I wonder, will we do exactly the same? Will we react with the same desire and zeal if it's just, you know, an unknown person, maybe someone off from the street who is a bit dirty and doesn't smell so good, who asks you to leave your nicely air-conditioned church to just go up the stairs to get him a bottle of water in the middle of the August heat wave. Now I remember I think it's also Matthew, Jesus says, whenever you offer water, food, clothes, hospitality, you visit the sick, the prisoner, etc., we serve Jesus whenever we serve even the least of these. We are disciples of Jesus. We do like him. So serve with love, serve with kindness, and serve with humility. All mankind. So, what do? How do we serve? Romans 12 encourages us to action. We all have gifts. We all have gifts. Use them. Put them to use. Are you not sure what your gift is? Just start serving wherever you see a need. It doesn't really matter whether it's a big need or a little need, it's just a need. So step in if you see a need, serve. I was thinking about Paul. He didn't just get saved, encounter the Lord Jesus, and went off into a missionary service. He didn't just move on from there to there. He spent time doing other things. He first goes to the desert and spends time there. Then he goes to Jerusalem and Tarsus. And then he spends another year preaching in Antioch. You can read all about that. It's in Galatians and Act 9 and Acts 12. He didn't just go and do the big thing. And I'm not saying that everybody needs a long period of time before you can serve. You don't need to have a degree in theology and then a master in slave serving. You just need to start working and serving, just need to move. Because the water did not part until Moses started walking. Sorry, my English is really bad today. So when I started attending TFC, I did nothing for a while because I just couldn't. I was not in the right place to do anything. But then after a while, you remember Joan? Joan, the thing one. What was her surname? Harris. Yay, her. Joan just came to me and tells me, Alicia, I need somebody to help me. I need to serve communion and there's not enough hands. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And I think that was the first thing I ever did here in TFC. The church was still facing that side, and I just took one side and I just served the communion. That was the first thing I ever did. Nothing big, nothing massive. I just, handed out the bread and the wine. And then, by then, I had a Spanish person. I had learned to make a decent cup of tea. So I served for a while in the kitchen, but that didn't work very well, and I was kicked out, and it's best if I stay out of the kitchen. So I can operate a computer because of my work and just because of my work, I'm computer literate. So I can work the computer, and I served for a while at the back doing the media. When the program was something that was understandable and easy to operate, I did that. But that same skills that has not been taken over by the youth and very efficient girls at the back, because I cannot. But that means that those same skills help me now to, or allow me now to assist the treasurer, because I know how to, or I can learn to operate the accounting program. Not that I'm an accountant, I'm terrible with numbers, but I'm good at punching and typing. So you serve that way. As a native Spanish speaker, with this into English I wrote, but it's obviously not that very decent today. But anyway, I've helped many of the members of the congregation with small translations. They had documents and they came to me and was like, Alicia, what does it say here? And I quickly helped them. It was nothing big. And then I was able to get involved with paperwork with the local administrations here in the church. And then I had the privilege to use my language skills to help some of the lads that were living rough down in Las Americas when we had the living room, and help them to enter into the Spanish rehabs. Because I spoke Spanish, I could speak for them, and they took the opportunity to change their lives. That was a massive privilege. And lately, I've been able to use those same skills to help to allow Spanish speakers to join us here in TFC and receive the word here in this church, in this English-speaking church, which I think is amazing privilege. And then there was a time that the pastors, they realized that I was able to kind of put together a teaching. And it all started with, Alicia, can you just do a quick 5-minute thought for the ladies' breakfast? Nothing heavy, nothing big, something simple. Yeah, look where those 5 minutes have taken me. So, word of caution, if you're thinking, I should serve in TFC, beware the pastors, they're bullies. They'll have you running around the church doing 10,000 multitasking in no time. But that's good, because they will sharpen your talents. So there is no need to have 10 talents all sharp and ready before you start serving. And there is no need to pull off something awe-inspiring. There's no need for any of that. I am sure that you have got at least one talent. You speak to the leaders and you get that talent and you put it to work and you watch how that one talent grows, develops, and even multiplies. The other thing that I read and caught my attention from Paul's instructions is to serve with sincerity of heart. And I think that's a word of caution, because sometimes we need to stop. I don't know if you caught it in the song that the children performed for us last week. There was, when they were singing, you can serve God every day. You can serve God with our hug and when we love and when we hug. Remember, we all giggled because the kids were all hugging each other. But there was one line in the middle of that song that says, I can serve God when we stop. And sometimes you need to stop. And you need to stop altogether. Because you're just spinning like a top and getting absolutely nothing done, and you're helping no one. And you're serving the enemy despite your best intentions. You mean to help, you mean to be of service, but you're achieving nothing. Philippians 2, verse 3 says, to do nothing out of selfish ambition, of vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking at your own interests, but each of you the interest of the other. So I really ask you to pause and be aware of what is your motivation, what is driving you to serve. The majority of times, your service is going to go unrecognized. Matthew 6 tells us, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. So in order to serve in anonymity, you must make sure that your heart is in the right place. Otherwise, you're going to be easy prey for the enemy. And also, be aware of your reaction to your worship, to your service. How are you responding to the task that is involving your service? How are you responding to the person that is asking you to serve or is needing your service? Checkout list, which is short and not at all full. There will be other things, but make sure you check up for unforgiveness or resentment, Mark 11. Make sure you check out for unconfessed sin, Psalm 66. Make sure you check for selfishness, James 4. And make sure you check for disobedience to Scripture, Proverbs 28. And if any of those apply to you, just stop. And then you sort yourself out with God and with the person that you are serving but not serving. Remember Matthew 5, where he says that if you bring in a sacrifice and there's something that's hindering you, you leave your sacrifice at the altar and then you go and be reconciled, and then you come back and you offer your gift. You can always come back to offer your gift. You can always serve. Just make sure that your motivation and that your heart is correct and is right. Now, another caution that I would like to make sure that you all understand, as I said in the beginning, serving is worship. Remember what Bill said, worship engages in spiritual battle. So when you choose obedience and when you choose to serve and to serve like a slave for God, it doesn't matter the size or the shape of the service that you are taking up, you are engaging in spiritual battle. Be wise about this. Expect the opposition. You don't fight with no enemy. To have a battle, you need to have an enemy, and the enemy is going to oppose you. If you think of the movies about medieval wars and everything, and a city is about to be sieged, but the main character catches word that the enemy is coming, so he comes running back, and what does he do? He warns the city, and they get all rallied up, and they start putting up their defenses. They build up the walls, they dig pits, and they put coverings so that the horses will trample down, and the army will be all scattered, and they start boiling the pitch or oil or whatever it is that they throw from the ramparts. They start getting prepared. Be prepared. When you're choosing to serve and worship God, expect the opposition. Be prepared. Get yourself ready to defend yourself. And you do that by putting on the whole armor of God, so that you will serve and remain standing. You find that in Ephesians 6. And then another thing that caught my attention, Paul says that you will receive. And it's another thing that we need to know when we serve as disciples of Jesus. As always with God, obedience comes with benefits. Serving as a slave has perks. In 1 Corinthians 9, Paul says, I do all of this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Luke 6 tells us that give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together and running over, so it will be poured into your lap. For with the measure that you use, it will be measured to you. But my favorite is Psalm 37:4. Take delight into the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. When I was preparing for this study, I remember that I had many years ago prepared another study that I called Scary Service. So I went and I digged it up. And in Scary Service, I spoke how God makes us or takes us to service in areas in which we are not comfortable, because we feel that we are not well equipped to. There are the areas that take us out of our comfort zone. And that scary service then in turn builds us up. It builds up our faith. And of course gives him the glory. And in the study I was using at the time speaking in public and speaking in English, because are two things that joined together. They take me out of my comfort zone. And as you can hear, today my English is not particularly good, so these are the things that make serving like this a scary service for me. But that's not what I want to dwell in. One of the things that I wrote in this in this preach that I put together, it was donkeys years ago. We were still doing the evening service in the living room. It was what to me would be like my wildest, most craziest possible, most impossible ever form of service. And I wrote that it will be to be called to serve in worship, because I am not naturally musical, and that's a fact. I'm not naturally, it's not my natural gift, music. And but I love music. It's always been a very important part of my life, and I love to worship. I really, really do. But as I said, I'm not talented musically speaking. That's why my parents never put me through any musical teaching when I was a child. Like my brothers and my sister did. I didn't. They just didn't waste the time with me, because it was like, rather hopeless. And I wrote that years before I even thought or considered or touched a guitar. But, you serve the Lord and you take delight in him, and he will give you the desires of your heart. There you go. If that is not encouragement, at the moment, being involved in the worship band is one of the highlights of my Christian walk. I love it, I enjoy it, even when the leader chooses a song in the key of E minor, sus, 7 sharp, and you stand there and it's like, what? Yeah. So, just to close up and finally, yes, we may serve as slaves. We serve as slaves because we want to follow Jesus' example. But at all times, when you are in the middle of this slave service, in this chore that nobody else wants to do, remember who you are in Jesus Messiah. In Jesus Messiah, you, the slave who's serving, even that person that nobody wants to serve, you are an adopted son or daughter of the Lord Most High. You are an heir to the kingdom of heaven, and you are a priest of the royal line of Melchizedek. John 15:15, Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me. I chose you, and I appointed you so that you may go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. Remember who you are. Yes, we serve because we follow Jesus. Absolutely serve like a slave for his sake and for his glory. But at all times, remember, you're not a servant. He calls you friend. Thank you for listening.